Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Understanding the Budgeting Process webinar. My name is Jade Liao, and I will be leading it today. For questions, please use the GoToWebinar question area of the control panel, and they will be addressed at the appropriate time by one of our EP team members. During the session, all attendees will be muted. So the purpose of today's webinar is to give you an understanding of the budgets that are entered into JDE so that you can hopefully connect the dots from what's entered into JDE and what is represented and shown in Hubble. Usually, or speaking of the monthly labor forecast. So I'm going to start from the very beginning and talk about how a job's created in JDE and the steps that are taken afterwards. And hopefully this will help you understand what data you're really seeing in the monthly labor forecast. So after a contract is signed with a customer, the field or yourself or one of your team members creates a job in JDE. After a job is created in JDE, it's then routed to the financial director of that region, and it is then approved. After that, the job is routed up to corporate and is approved by the operations support group. After a job has been set up and processed, a budget is then uploaded into JDE. The budget details consist of the labor budget and revenue details. Information is then pulled over to Hubble and reflected in the monthly labor forecast. So as I've mentioned, the operations support group approves and processes these job setups. The operations support group can be reached at the email that you see here on the screen, opsupport@us.issworld.com. And you can contact the operations support group, or otherwise known as the OSG, for all budget submissions, changes, or requests. Now, I've given you some background information on jobs and how they are set up and the process that they go through in order to reach corporate. And now I'll give you a bit more detail on the budgeting side as far as labor details and revenue details. Please send us an email if you have any questions regarding job setups or budgets, and we will address any of your issues, requests, and etc. The OSG team consists of Christian Contreras, Chandra Raber, Beth Briones, and myself. So budgeting in JDE. We'll start by reviewing revenue. Depending on the billing type of a job, certain details are required in order to correctly budget for revenue. We will briefly review each billing type and what information is required and what information is optional. So we'll start off with the billing type of FX, otherwise known as fixed revenue. There are two required fields in JDE, those being the fixed monthly amount and the total janitorial square footage of this job, that being the cleanable square footage. Once this information is entered, it calculates and then reflects appropriately in the monthly labor forecast along with any other reporting tools. Next, we'll review service day revenue, otherwise known as billing type of SD. And this is revenue billed by the number of days serviced. So there are three required fields for this billing type in JDE. Those are the total janitorial square footage, the service day revenue amount, and of course, the number of service days per month. After those are entered, all of those are used in a calculation, and it produces the monthly revenue amount and is reflected appropriately in the monthly labor forecast and other reporting tools. Going back, an optional field is also fixed revenue. If you have an additional fixed amount that you receive aside from the service day revenue, we can also accommodate that and budget it here. For attendance-based jobs or the billing type A, revenue-based pre-event or attendee, there are two required fields in JDE, those being the fixed revenue per event and the number of events per month. There are two optional fields depending on how the job runs and the contract that you have with that customer. We can also budget revenue per attendee and labor percentage of revenue. So again, those fields are not required, but if that information is within the contract and a part of how you receive revenue from that customer, we can accommodate that. So square footage jobs, billing based on the janitorial square footage. There are two required fields in JDE. Those being, of course, the total janitorial square footage, the cleanable, as well as the full occupancy price per foot. There are three optional fields aside from that, just depending on the contract and the details. If there is an additional fixed revenue on top of this, we can add it here. If there is a vacancy credit rate, we can also add that here, but we will of course need the vacant square footage. Switching to a cost plus all, billing type known as Y. And the required information or fields are here on this screen, boxed in red. There are 8 different fields in which we can enter the markup percentage. They can all be the same amount or the same markup percentage, or they can vary and be different, just depending on the details of the contract. If any of these fields have a non-billable markup percentage, we can also accommodate that by entering 999 in this field. Switching to cost plus wages only, billing type known as FC, the required information that we enter in JDE is going to be the total janitorial square footage and, of course, the cost plus labor markup percentage. Entering 999 for non-billable markup percentage is also an option. So we are also able to budget for OTJ revenue. Of course, this is contractual OTJ revenue. And there are 2 different ways that we can budget for that, that being the fixed amount and a percentage of revenue. For either of those, the revenue rate will obviously be required. However, in addition to that, we can also budget a labor percentage. So that concludes all of the billing types and just hopefully giving you a better understanding of what kind of information we enter depending on the billing type of a job. And based on the information entered, there are certain calculations that run in the background and pull over to the monthly labor forecast. So transitioning from revenue details to labor details, I'm going to review the required details for budgeting weekly labor. The required information is boxed in red here on the screen, and I'll just review these fields from left to right. We will need the employee head count of this job that you're budgeting for. We'll also need to know whether or not this job is a union or non-union job. If it is a union, we will need the union code. If it is a non-union job, there will be nothing else that you need to provide. We'll also need the hourly rate of this employee, the shift, whether they work night or day, the task of the employee, so whether they're a custodian, a floor tech, a supervisor, etc., and the weekly hours that they work. Now, please keep in mind that the weekly hours is per employee. Please do not total them up when providing this information to OSG. We'll also need to know the pay class, so whether or not this employee is hourly or salary, and whether or not they receive holiday pay. Now, please keep in mind that in order to group more than one employee on one line, they will need to make the same hourly rate, work the same shift, have the same task description, and work the same amount of weekly hours, and have the same pay class. And of course, pay rate. So if any of these are different, the lines will need to be broken out and the employees will need their own individual lines. If all of those fields are the same for more than one employee, please feel free to group them together under employee headcount, the first field. For paid holiday employee, this can be whichever number you choose as long as it's not larger than the employee head count in the first field. So for example, if on line 2 we have 2 employees listed here, if only one of them received holiday pay, it would be sufficient to enter 1 under that field. If neither of them receive holiday pay, it would be sufficient to enter 0 under that field. So transitioning to the loaded rate billing type, which I did not previously review in the revenue details slides, this is because the required information is very similar to the labor budget. Revenue is calculated based on the billable hourly rate, and we ask for that here in the labor budget. So all details are the same except for the billable hourly rate, which is what we will need in addition to your labor budget. Otherwise, like I've mentioned, all other details are the same. Transitioning to periodic labor. So I reviewed how to budget for weekly labor and the necessary details that you'll need to provide to OSG when setting up a budget for a job. I also like to review periodic labor and the details required for that. So the template here looks very similar to the weekly labor budget. There are only a few differences, and that being the work frequency and the week of the month. So depending on the work frequency, there are certain details that are required. We're able to budget for annual work, monthly work, and quarterly work. If you would like to budget for annual work, we will need you to provide the week of the month in which it occurs, as well as the month of the year in which it occurs. If you like to budget for monthly work, we would just need you to provide the week of the month in which it occurs. If you would like to budget for quarterly work, we would need you to provide the week of the month in which it occurs, as well as the month of the quarter, so the first, second, or third month of that quarter. Otherwise, all other details are the same as the weekly labor budget. Now let's transition to budget changes. After a budget is entered, it will obviously need to be maintained and updated as necessary. For revenue changes on a job, please email the OSG. We will need you to provide the job number and all necessary details. And of course, this is dependent on the billing type and the changes that are being made. Please keep in mind that all revenue changes will need to be approved by the financial director of your region. For labor changes, please email the OSG as well. We do ask that you use an Excel spreadsheet to help us better identify what changes need to be made. And I will briefly review a spreadsheet that will be sent out to the general managers of each company, and it will be for your use, and you can use this spreadsheet to send updates for jobs. So I'll transition here to the Excel spreadsheet. And this is what it will look like. So you'll have all necessary information, the job number and description, the billing type of the job, and all labor details, start and end months, of course the employee head count, the union code if any, the pay class, the pay rate of the employees, the shift, night or day, the task description along with the task code, the work frequency, so whether or not this is weekly labor or periodic labor, employee hours per week, and weekly hours. You'll also get the totals that JDE calculates, the weekly pay amount and the monthly hours, and the monthly pay amount. The bill rate is also included for those loaded rate billing types. You'll also see how many employees receive holiday pay and other information such as vacation replacement percentage and so on and so forth. And over here in column W and X, you'll see the month of the quarter, month of the year, also week of the month for those periodic budgets. You can also use the remarks field for any necessary notes that you may want OSG to enter for future reminders or things like that. Of course, the company, project, and district information. Once this is sent out, we ask that you use this format to submit any changes for the labor budget. And we ask that you highlight the cell in which a change is being made to. For example, if this line here, where we have one employee working at 27.25 day shift, who's hourly, a technician, and we hired a second employee who works the same amount, has the same task code, works the same shift, works in the same amount of weekly hours, and is also non-union, we'd simply change the head count to a 2 because nothing else has changed. And highlighting the cell yellow lets the OSG know this is what you intend to have changed in the JDE labor budget. You are also able to insert a line for someone who works this job. So you hire someone else and they have different details that you need to enter. You just fill in the necessary information. So they're hourly, they make a pay rate of $10, they work night shift, it's a floor tech, it's weekly work, and they work 20 hours a week. They receive holiday pay. And that would be it. Also, feel free to enter any necessary notes that the OSG may need to consider. You would then email this straight to the Ops Support Group at us.issworld.com as an attachment. Transitioning back to our slideshow here. After a change is made in JDE, after we've updated any of your details, it takes about 5 minutes to calculate and reflect in Hubble. So it is an immediate change and you will be able to see it in the same business day. Please utilize the monthly labor forecast. You are able to drill down and see the JDE budgets that we've entered for you guys. You're able to see all details that I've shown you here on this slide for labor, not for revenue. And a friendly reminder to attend the monthly labor forecast dashboard webinar on Thursday at 2 p.m. Central Time. If you attend this webinar, you'll be able to see a little bit more of the drill downs and the drill down to the actual JDE labor budget where all of this data is pulled. Thank you for joining us today, and please let us know if you have any questions. If not, we look forward to working with you, and we hope that you attend our future webinars.